3 Reasons, a message for America's veterans from James Belcher. August 4, 2020. I don't often speak up, so I hope you will listen when I do. There are three reasons for you to take this message to heart. First, your country is at risk and needs you. Second, your countrymen are at risk and they need you. Third, your own future is at risk and you need to take action for your own sake. I spent a total of 6 years in military and agency service just prior to and during the Vietnam conflict. I always wondered why all the simpering and refusal to call it for what it was, the Vietnam War. Technically, as most of us now know, what went on in Vietnam wasn't defined as a war. It was a mercenary conflict, also known as a police action. And technically, we were never soldiers, either. We were cheap mercenaries sold by the politicians to serve foreign interests, just like the Hessians. Many of us were conscripted by an illegal draft system against our will. None of us were told our true status as mercenaries at the time, or afterward. We had to figure it out by ourselves. For me, the revelation began with Robert McNamara, United States Secretary of Defense, and an obscure BBC broadcast in which he explained the technical difference between a conflict and a war. European audiences were better informed about what we were doing than we were. This is just one example of what you haven't been told. Here's another. Did you know that if you served at any time since 1946 and were discharged from military service, honorably or dishonorably, you are still in the service? Prior to 1946, when you left military service, it was legally presumed that you returned home to your original political status as an American, and that you were no longer under any obligation to the federal government and no longer adopting any kind of federal citizenship. But in 1946, all that changed. The reason for the change was originally to save money and avoid giving World War II veterans benefits that they had earned. Every man who returned home was supposed to be given a stock portfolio as part of the payment for his service. So they changed the definitions to make sure that those men, and those of us who followed after them in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq and countless other foreign battlegrounds, never came home. Technically. According to the legal definitions. Again. If you have been discharged from any branch of the United States military at any time since 1946, you haven't really been discharged from service obligations. Instead of presuming that you went home to your natural political status as an American after leaving military service, they have presumed that you stayed in federal jurisdiction and that you volunteered to continue an endless tour of duty in an undisclosed reserve status. I remember listening to a group of Marines drilling at Shepherd Air Force Base, and hearing all those men shouting, "I am an American." I wonder how they'd feel if they knew that there is a big and ugly difference between being an American and being a U.S. citizen. I wonder how my buddies from the Nam era would feel if they knew that they'd been served up as cheap mercenaries and never got what they were owed as benefits for it. I wonder how any American veteran would feel if they knew that they were never properly discharged from federal service and federal jurisdiction, and that lapse on the part of the politicians and their flunkies meant that they lost their constitutional guarantees and the freedoms they fought for. It also means that we paid federal income taxes, whether or not we had any income from federal sources. It means we got stuck paying mortgages owed by foreign governments. It means we were the goats, the targets, the easy marks. And they got away with it, because we stupidly, trustingly, believed that the federal subcontractors were our government. And we trusted our government. About now, you are feeling the sock in the gut. Maybe some of you are in denial and angry with me for saying all this. I was angry, too, and for a long time, I didn't know where to go or what to do about it. Now, I do. The first step is to send a registered letter, return receipt requested, to the head of your former branch of service or services, if you served in more than one, informing him or her that you have been discharged and are returning to your birthright political status, and please amend your records accordingly. Now, you are finally home, and the U.S. government has no plausible excuse for presuming otherwise. Next, declare and record your birthright political status. Your parents weren't told that they needed to do this for you, so it didn't get done. It's up to you to make a public declaration that you are a Minnesotan, Texan or Vermonter. Next, get off the hump and join your state assembly organization. You are part of a state, not a state of state. A state of state, like the state of Florida, is a business organization hired to do work for the state under a service contract known as the state of whichever constitution. Most likely, you are an employer, not an employee, and you are being inappropriately taxed and bossed around by your employees. It's time to change all of that. And I already told you why, for the sake of your country, your countrymen, and yourself. We've all been lied to, cheated, bilked, and are now threatened with civil war by these hirelings, these foreign political parties, and the politicians pretending to represent us. You may have heard that Mr. Trump recently ordered 600 million vaccine shots. If you've ever served in the United States military, your health has already been severely undermined by experimental vaccines and exposure to nuclear waste and other forms of radiation and pollution. Now the federal corporations, the foreign subcontractors responsible for these outrages, are proposing to mandate untested vaccines for the general population of this country, and they think that they can get away with it by pretending that we are all U.S. citizens and not Americans. You may assume that this is being done in response to an outbreak of a dangerous strain of the common flu virus, but no virus known as SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 has ever been isolated or identified. And no vaccine manufacturer or government is standing good for damages caused by this vaccine, either. About now, the red alert alarm bells should be going off in your heads and you should be thinking, WTF. Bill Gates and friends, including Dr. Fauci, have developed a patented RNA vaccine. This inserts a tiny scrap of patented RNA into your cells, and gives the owners of that patent an excuse to say that they own you, because they own that tiny scrap of implanted and privately patented RNA. They are aiming at creating 600 million slaves worldwide, owned body and soul by the USA, Inc. They assume that you are going to roll up your sleeves, and as long as you allow them to misidentify you as a U.S. citizen, they think they have the right to force you and your family to do so. It is well past the time that the politicians and the puppet master bankers behind all this got a needle shoved where the sun don't shine, but the first step is for you to come home, write that letter and exonerate yourself from any presumption of continued federal service. Do it today. Then follow up with your state assembly and declare and record your political status as an American, not a U.S. citizen. And then, get busy and shove. You are the employers. They are the employees. Make it count. Go to www.theamericanstatesassembly.com and get started.